Hello and welcome to the Talk Football Pod. Joining me today is Paul Nelson. He's a Spurs fan. He's probably not too happy. Let's hear what he's got to say. Welcome to the pod, Paul.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
No worries, mate. Bearing in mind, we've just sat and watched, not together, thankfully, but we have just sat and watched Spurs getting beat by Leeds 3-1. I guess you're not in the best of moods today.
I'm actually not too bad. I'm used to it. You know, when you sack a manager a week before a cup final and a manager that you've brought in to win a trophy, and then you employ someone who's 29 and never managed anyone before, what do you expect? So
yeah,
he's won 2 and he's lost 2. He's won 2 home games. He's lost 2 away games. We're going to be inconsistent. We're a club that lacks direction. We don't know where we're going. We've got a chairman who is more interested in profit and more interested in an entertainment venue than what he is the football club. So until that changes, not much is really going to change on the pitch.
And going back to sort of late November, early December, you were in a promising position, top of the league, 9 games unbeaten. What went wrong?
Well, it's been a strange old season, full stop, really. If I go back before that, first game at home against Everton, we were absolutely shocking. That's got to be one of the worst Tottenham performances of the last 10 years. And then we went away to Southampton and the first half was just as bad. Then somehow we come out and we end up winning that game 5-1. We smashed Southampton in the second half. Smashed United 6-1 and you start to, but we're still not playing well at this point. Then West Ham, and we managed to go 3-up against West Ham. We played some nice stuff in the first half. Bale comes on. And there's 10 minutes to go. We're still 3-0 up. And somehow we end up drawing that game 3-3.
I remember that game quite well. And that, for many fans, that sort of almost signalled the point of capitulation.
Yeah, I'd say there were 2 points. There was that one, which I guess was a warning sign. And then the second one would have been the Liverpool game. So, as you say, we get to end of November, begin December. We're top of the league, still not having played well. So, my position is, internally, I'm getting very carried away. I'm like, well, we're top of the league here and we're not playing well. If we start to play well with the players that we've got, and again, by this time, you know, Bale's barely kicked a ball, so we feel like we've got him in reserve. You know, if we start to play well, Christ, God knows what we could achieve this season. Jose's a man, great appointment, everything's going fine and dandy, even though, you know, with the big asterisk that we are not playing well. And then the irony is, we then go up to Liverpool, and this is a turning point. We actually do play well. And we're doing well. And then we missed a few chances at the beginning of the second half. End up losing the game 2-1. And it just seemed to crush the players' confidence. And then from there, we continued to play badly, but didn't get the results.
And I think, you know, looking back at that period as well, Kane and Son were absolutely flying.
Yeah, the other 9 weren't, no?
No, they are, and that's a problem.
Yeah, we were basically relying on them two. And, you know, there's this new stat that's come into football, isn't there? This XG, like, you know, anticipated or expected number of goals you get from your chances. So we're scoring 2 or 3 goals a game. And our XG, number of goals we should be scoring, is like less than 1. So we're basically converting almost every shot that we get on target. And, of course, that can't continue, and it didn't. My hope was that we would actually start to play better and get a few more shots on target and you know, and start to be a bit more attacking. But we didn't. We regressed and got worse and stopped winning.
And I think trouble is as well, when either one of them are out of the team, you know, that's never going to help. The team is so reliant on them to perform.
No, and yeah, Son is a very good player, but I wouldn't say he's a world-class player because he doesn't have that consistency that Kane has.
Yeah.
So Kane is obviously clearly world-class because he's consistent and he's improved his game. And this season has become not only Tottenham's number 10, but Tottenham's number 9. He's in effect playing 2 roles.
Yeah.
He's making up for the incredibly poor recruitment and the fact that we haven't replaced Eriksen. And he's having to cross the ball for him to score the goal at the same time. Son, on the other hand, is an amazing player when he's in his purple patch. But when he's not in his purple patch, and I'll go back to the League Cup final, because of his purple patches, he seems to get away with a lot. Whereas I would argue that the right substitution, say in that League Cup final, would have been to take Son off. But because Son has a name and a greater reputation, he seems to be the one that seems to be on the field. So it was Kane and Son without question, but with Son, he's going to have a little bit of a dry spell, which then puts the focus on Kane. And Kane can't be
everywhere.
Number 10, number 9, and your number 7. It's impossible.
So moving on from how the team, was playing and how things went on the slide, how much of that do you credit to your manager at the time?
Levy had an obsession with Mourinho. He tried to get him, I think, before he went to Chelsea. He tried to get him again after he left Chelsea the first time. I think Chelsea had some clause that said he couldn't go to Tottenham, which is quite ironic. Back in when would that have been, mid-2000s, after he won the title.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, there was a clause there that said he can't sign direct in for Spurs. So I think he was the right manager, but just 10 years too late. I mean, we were all gutted when Poch went. It was time to go. Poch had got tired. He'd had enough. And you have to feel for him again. He'd put up with Levy for a couple of years. We had that great 2017 team that didn't lose a game at the Lane, and then there was no investment post 2017 in the team. Poch got miracles out of next to nothing. Get to a Champions League final, luckily, which masked this major decline in the quality of the team. Poch is tired. You can tell he's tired and he's had enough and he wants to go.
Yeah, I think you could see that coming, actually. In the interviews, there was a lot of digs being thrown at the way of the ball.
I think he felt, look, I've achieved a lot with nothing. Now, give me some investment and give me some support and give me some help. But, Levy's not interested in that. Levy's only interested in running an entertainment venue. He doesn't need a successful football club. So Poch went. And as I said, Levy's got this obsession with Mourinho, and he gets him. Mourinho's available, so in that sense, he's the obvious manager. My first thought was, bloody hell, what have we done here? But then, in fact, I remember I was going into work early in the morning, so it was about 6 o'clock, and I was on the train, and I'm on the train, like literally grieving, like someone has died in my family because Poch has gone. And then within 10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, but we've now got someone who's going to win us trophies. As a Spurs fan, I'm absolutely desperate to win trophies.
And I think even with that, I mean, despite how it ended with Mourinho at Man United, and the way the fans didn't like the style of football, he still delivered them a trophy.
Well, I mean, he delivered a cup final, and again, Levy, perfect example. He isn't interested in the team, and he decides to sack him a week before a cup final, which is the rumour was we dropped down to 7th in the league, so it was cheaper to get rid of him. And then, of course, you've got the fact that he was believed to be on a bonus should we have won a cup, so Levy was just ultimately trying to save himself some money. Or the third one, of course, it almost perfectly times around the ESL announcement, which I know you want to go into.
We will be getting on the ESL for sure.
It makes him, it gives him some positivity amongst the fan base who by that stage were desperate to get him out. I mean, even though you're throwing away a cup final.
Did he get enough backing from the board with signings, in your opinion? I mean, obviously, Bow was brought back to the club in January on loan.
No, he came back in the summer.
Was it in the summer?
He came in the summer.
There we go.
Yes and no. The problem with the chairman is he always wants to meddle. So, and then equally, I think the problem with Mourinho is he's so linked to his own agent that you get players in from his own agent. So, Vinicius, as an example, I think you could put me up top and I'll do a better job than him.
Yeah, I might.
He scores goals. He scores tapping, so he gets himself in the right place.
Striker for a Premier League level.
No, but he's not involved in build-up play. He can't hold the ball up. So when you're playing, you're ultimately playing with a man less until you get the 2-yard tap in when you get in the box. So he was back to a degree. I mean, we signed a hell of a number of players, including Bale, Højbjerg, who was a great signing. But I was having this argument with some Spurs friends in the week that Højbjerg was a great signing for Spurs in summer 2020. But Højbjerg, like everyone else who's been signed since, would not be anywhere near that 2016-17 team.
No.
Which just shows the dearth of poor recruitment post-2017. That, we signed this guy who has been a revelation. He's knackered now because we've flogged him like a cart horse. but improves the current 11 and improves the current squad. But I'd argue wouldn't even have got on the bench in 2016, 2017, because you'd have had Dyer was pulling up trees in defensive midfield. Wanyama, who was an absolute beast. And then you also had a guy called Moussa Dembele who ran half bad. So, you know.
A player actually I like a lot, that one. And in terms of the players that are already at the club, I mean, how do you feel about his treatment of certain key players? I mean, obviously, Delhi's been off the boil for a while. But for me, anyway, looking from an outside perspective, the sort of like the treatment of players like Alderweireld didn't sort of sit right.
Well, he has a funny thing, doesn't he, Mourinho, where he seems to want to punish players. But he had, when he was at Chelsea, this first time, these core of players that he called his untouchables. And they could have a bad game and they wouldn't be dropped.
Yeah.
But I would have thought that Alderweireld signed a contract very soon after Mourinho came in, when it seemed that he wasn't going to sign one under Poch. And then he kept dropping and bringing him back again. Same with Dyer. So he tried to create this untouchables like he had at Chelsea with, obviously Kane and Son and Alderweireld or Dyer. But then if we let a goal in, Alderweireld or Dyer would end up being dropped. Højbjerg would have been, I guess, another untouchable. He alienated himself from the guys he should have been sticking close to. My only defence of Mourinho from a defensive perspective, and it sort of links into Bale, is Mourinho clearly wanted to spend big on a centre half and get a big experienced centre half in the Skriniar, I think the name is. The guy
the
Inter Milan was the one that he desperately wanted.
Quality player.
Now, again, typical Levy wouldn't go that extra 5 or 10 million to get the guy that the manager wants. But then, of course, we're spending a fortune on wages for Bale. So I have sympathy for Mourinho in the sense that if you don't get your target and the chairman's off fulfilling his own wet dreams in signings, then there's only so much to a degree the manager can do.
And in terms of players, let's talk a little bit more about Gareth Bale since he's come back.
Well, I mean, Bale was every Tottenham fan. It was every Tottenham fan's dream for Bale to return to Spurs. Every summer, the stories were there of how he loves the club, and he obviously was struggling at Madrid, and we all wanted him back. We never wanted him to go. So, I was as over the moon and as happy as every other Spurs fan when he signed, and wasn't worried about how much money we were paying him in wages. But then I guess the problem is he was clearly a Levy signing. Levy wanted him. It was, I guess he would say, it was a present to the fans. Of course, it's quite ironic that this year we haven't been in the ground and we haven't been able to watch him and kind of have that real connection. But so again, I guess that's a problem with Tottenham and recruitment, particularly since the end of 2017. In that it was a chairman signing that I don't believe the manager wanted. As I said before, I think the manager wanted to sign a centre half, and we ended up signing Bale. So, unfortunately, the way Mourinho works, instead of working with the best of what you've been given, he punishes what you've got because it's not exactly what he wanted.
And obviously, Gareth has pretty much played no football for the best part of 18 months, I would say, at Madrid.
He was clearly unfit when he first came in, and he was trying to give him the Europa League to give him games. And Mourinho was clearly concerned about the level of defensive work that Bale will do. And actually, quite ironically, post the Leeds game today, their second goal, in effect, can be put back to maybe Bale not tracking back.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, as people that have not played the game to any kind of high level, but even at relatively sort of low, sort of Sunday level, you need minutes to get your legs back.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be able to get fit. And then there was a really bad point earlier in the year, I think, for Mourinho's tenure, but also for Bale. Bale was ripping it up for about a month. And then we went into the Arsenal game, and of course, Bale's got a great record against Arsenal in his first spell, so we were expecting to do well, expecting to win that. And Bale had a stinker, but he wasn't alone. A lot of them did. And then again, talking about Mourinho picking on players, he picked on Bale and then dropped Bale, and then.
I mean, it is a Mourinho trait. I mean, he seems to want to try and inspire a player by knocking 7 bells out of them, and not not every player is going to respond to that.
No, it hasn't necessarily worked with Bale, and it hasn't necessarily worked with Dele either.
And I would say with Gareth as well, because I think possibly Zidane tried a similar kind of thing with Gareth, and Gareth's answer to that was to go and play some more golf.
Yeah, I think Mourinho should have learned from that. But again, it's ego, isn't it? Learn from that and put an arm around him and cajole him. And some players you have to treat differently, don't you? You know, like you're not going to treat Harry Kane the same as you treat Sergio Aurier, are you? And you certainly shouldn't. You know, just like in any workplace, if you're managing different people, you don't treat all individuals the same. It should be no different with a team. And some people need an arm around the shoulder.
And Dele,
some need a kick
maybe Dele's another one of those as well. I mean, it's a funny thing with Dele because if you go back a couple of years, the kid was absolutely flying. I mean, he terrorised Chelsea. I mean, whenever he stepped on the pitch against us, he seemed to score.
Dele suffered in the first instance from Tottenham's lack of recruitment. So I go back to, you know, when we had Dembele and we had that great central midfield pre-2017. But then, of course, post-2017, we stopped signing good players. So what Pochettino did was he brought Dele back into the centre of midfield as opposed to playing number 10 and running past Kane. He was playing a lot deeper. Now that ruined Dele's game, in all honesty, because it meant if you look at him when he's at his best, he runs off the ball.
Yeah.
And he has one touch and
he's
arriving late in the box.
Yeah.
He's not involved in games. He doesn't run a game. He's never been that player. He just has one or two really influential touches that often will lead to a goal or a chance, and that's how he influences a game of football.
I think we've had conversations about that before. That you know, he's not, like I say, he's not that kind of player.
Well, I used to watch Lampard at Chelsea, and I used to think, what's he doing in a game? He's playing centre midfield, but then he'd scored 2 goals, and Chelsea will win the game. So he's done his job. And Dele was the same. And then when Pochettino brought him back, then he started, because he was playing in central midfield, he started thinking he was Pirlo. And he started having 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 touches, when his game is really about just controlling it and getting rid of it and going. But I don't blame him for that, because he was being brought back deep because of the lack of quality in the Tottenham squad, because of the lack of recruitment. And the manager was working the best of what he had, and he said, right, well, you know, we'll use Dele and we'll bring him back because I've got no one else.
In terms of recruitment, if I was to spring that on you, you know, if it was players maybe from around the Premier League that you would think would be a good fit
for Tottenham for this summer?
For now, yeah.
Well, for as negative as I am about where the club is at the moment, I also only think we are a very good centre half and a half decent right back away from competing again. And I say half decent because we've got 2 incompetent players at right back at the moment.
Yeah.
And we clearly need a leader at centre half. Now, I'm not sure if that centre half leader currently plays in the Premier League. It probably is.
Yeah, I mean, there was someone like Vestergaard at Southampton. You know, he's big, decent on the ball, a leader certainly.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
but maybe at the wrong kind of age.
Well, when Liverpool signed Van Dijk, they got Van Dijk and Alisson that actually completely overhauled their team, didn't they?
Yeah.
Now, when they signed Van Dijk for all that money, there was no guarantee that a guy who played for Celtic and Southampton was suddenly going to be this leader that was going to see them win the Champions League and win the league and the Club World Cup and all that. So the guy for Spurs may well be in the Premier League, and that's where I think we are. We need our Van Dijk, and we can't try and do it on the cheap.
No,
we need to spend big money on a leader centre half.
And I think he needs to be someone who also can hit the ground running in the Premier League, so not have a settling in period. I think from outside the Premier League, that's a difficult thing to find.
And then a right back. So just like Liverpool needed Van Dijk and Alisson, if we can get ourselves a centre half and a right back, I think we're right back up there again.
Would you take Trippier back from Atletico?
Well, if you look at Tottenham's, I go on and on about Tottenham's poor recruitment. You look at what we've done around right back, and it is tragic. So you've got, at one point we had Trippier and we had Walker.
Yeah, Walker-Peters, throw that one in
there. Yeah, and we decided to sell Walker for 50 million because we wanted the money. Now, I've no problem with selling Walker, but you've got to get your recruitment right. And we basically signed Aurier for, I think it was 25 million. And the values of them 2 players add up perfectly, because Walker is a very, very good right back. Aurier is an average right back with a ricket in him. He's half as good as what Walker is, so he cost half as much as what Walker did. And then we had Trippier there, who Trippier had one bad season and then he got bombed out.
And that was, I think that was the season
We got
preceding the World Cup, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he had a bit of a dip. Obviously, went out, massive high with England, comes back.
Yeah.
I think probably natural to have a bit of a dip.
I think he was knackered from the World Cup, and he has one bad year, and we bomb him out, and then we don't recruit anyone. Like you say, we get the miss, and this is only one criticism I would have of Poch since we became in the Champions League. He didn't let the youth come through. So early on, you saw Kane, you saw Mason, you saw Bentaleb. All these Townsend, all these youth players come through, and there was a real community there. And then, of course, it gets more difficult when you have to qualify for the Champions League. And he did mismanage Walker Peters, but I think Walker Peters is doing a great job down there.
He is. Ironically, it's Southampton again. He's a very good player.
I think he looks a good player. Now we needed to get Højbjerg, so I understand getting rid of him. But if he went out on loan for a couple of years, I think he could have been the perfect guy to come in. But and then Trippier is better than what we got. So I would take him back in my long-winded answer to your question.
Excellent. So obviously player recruitment will depend heavily on who your next manager will be. I can't see Mason getting the job full time. Probably a bit too soon for someone like him. So who would you like your next manager to be?
I think probably the better question is who wants it? Because it seems like everyone is distancing themselves from the job as much as they can. The Ajax guy gets mentioned one day, the next day he signed a new contract. Rodgers has distanced himself from it because, of course, he's in a Leicester team in a cup final and got a greater chance of qualifying for the Champions League than what Spurs has.
Yeah.
And, of course, he knows he's got greater control at Leicester. And he comes to Tottenham and he knows that Levy will be, on his shoulder, over his shoulder and not give him the freedom to do what he wants to do.
So I've got a couple of names to throw at you. One being Scott Parker, the other being Graham Potter. Obviously, Scott has got a history with the club. Potter, you would say, in terms of a style of football, would probably fit the way the Spurs fans want to play. So what would you think about either one of those two for a start?
Well, I mean, Parker would look good on the bench, wouldn't he? He dresses
the
well.
part, yeah.
I think he did a good job last year. I like his mannerisms, but
I think certainly with Parker as well is, despite the fact of where they are, and they have been incredibly unlucky in some of their games for them, they do play an attractive style of football.
You say they've been unlucky, but then you could say the same with Tottenham this year. The number of points we dropped from winning positions. It's not being unlucky, is it? It's ultimately a lack of quality.
Lack of quality players, yeah. Obviously, with Fulham, their recruitment over the summer, they didn't really go out and sign.
But you need to manage that differently, I think. And I don't quite think Parker's ready. Parker used to be at Spurs, obviously, and managing the youth, and I know he's very well respected at Spurs, but.
And also, I think maybe a stigma of the fact that you're recruiting a manager, having sacked a manager with a high proven trophy-winning record, to then taking on a manager with a fresh relegation, sitting on their CV, and to be honest, not much else sitting on the CV.
It doesn't look good, does it?
It don't.
It's
romantically, in terms of history, obviously it's a nice tie-in, but perhaps maybe the wrong man for this time.
The only problem with Parker is that you could have that romantic link with any
possibly. He's had a number of clubs, that's for sure.
He could go back to Chelsea. He could go to Charlton, couldn't he?
Was he at Newcastle as well?
He was at Newcastle, yeah.
Graham Potter is an interesting one. Because, again, an attractive style of football at Brighton, but they've come perilously close to the drop this season. They've really tailed off towards the end of the season, which would suggest that high-intensity, high-press game that Brighton play with the wrong kind of players and maybe the wrong kind of age bracket of players could be a bit of a worry unless you had an investment into the club that would bring fresh legs in.
Well, the talk seems to be that Levy wants another project manager. He basically wants Poch. He can't get Poch, so who's Poch Mark 2? Now, I quite like Potter because ultimately I would like a manager that has Premier League experience.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be in the Champions League. So the most important thing is to get back up that table again.
I think he has done a good job with Brighton.
Yeah, and you're right, they do play good football. And again, they don't have the same quality of player that Tottenham does. Can he manage big-name players? Would Potter joining Tottenham be enough to make Kane think, this is the club I want to be for?
Well, I think this is an interesting thing with Kane because if you was to look at it from an outside perspective, I'm looking at that thinking, well, Kane's rattling on and doing a lot of interviews at the moment about that he wants to be successful, wants to win trophies. Is he prepared to stick around for another 3 or 4 years for a start of a project?
If it was me, and I'd like to believe I'm as big a Tottenham fan as what Kane is, I personally wouldn't. And this isn't the first time that we've had this conundrum. You know, I can remember back in the early 90s with the likes of Sheringham, even, dare I say his name, Sol Campbell. You know, it's the same concept. It's players that have just run out of patience with the club, run out of patience with the direction the club's going in.
Yeah.
I think, as far as keeping Kane is concerned, or at least keeping Kane happy, our best chance is that England win the Euros.
Well, yeah. I think also, to be honest, coronavirus has had a massive impact on the fact that there's possibly maybe only 1 or 2 clubs that, I mean, if you look back maybe 18 months ago, close to 2 years ago, before this whole pandemic started, and you were fast forward to this point and none of this had happened, 100% you'd probably be looking at the Madrids, Barcelonas would possibly come sniffing because they wouldn't bulk at that price tag. Arguably, possibly only Man United and Manchester City could maybe afford to do a deal for Kane now.
But this is where Levy will shoot Tottenham in the foot again. I mean, this is a conversation based on the assumption that Kane wants to go.
Yeah.
So let's assume he does. Then what Levy will do is, like he did with Bale, is he will hold out until he can sell Kane to the very last second to try and get
as much money,
which will destabilise the club throughout the whole summer.
Yeah.
It will, and then ultimately he won't get the money, the full amount of money that he wants.
And it will also hold back recruitment.
Exactly. Yeah. So my issue is how happy is Kane. Now, Kane could be happy to give Potter a year, as an example, and then come to an agreement with Levy that he goes next summer, because then he might feel that he's still not too young.
Yeah, just turning 28.
Yeah,
you know, arguably, I mean, in a different league or even in a different team, you know, he may not have to be working as hard for chances as he would be at the moment.
I think it's definitely important to Kane that he is Tottenham and the Premier League's top goal scorer. I'd hate to see him go to Man City or go to Man United, but Man City's probably his most likely option. Personally, I wouldn't go to, because I think United is almost as much a risk at Spurs. This last season that's just gone is a bit of an anomaly, isn't it, really?
Really? Yeah.
We don't know what it's going to be like when crowds are back in. So City would be the obvious one. But City get Kane and then they're light years ahead of everyone, aren't they?
I mean, that would be frightening. And they do need a replacement because, you know, Aguero is going. So, you know, is there...
I mean, maybe that, and not that it will be an actual swap deal because, of course, Aguilera. He's on a free, isn't he? So he can do what he wants.
Yeah, and likely to move abroad, I would think.
And Barcelona are interested, aren't they? So,
yeah,
and they'll pay the money.
They'll pay the money. No transfer fee. A lot of wages, obviously, but yeah.
But he would have been good at Spurs, but. I don't know. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's, you know, the whole thing hanging over Spurs is the new manager and Kane's future.
So Mr. Levy's got a lot to answer for at the moment.
And the worrying thing from a Spurs perspective is if you look at his recruitment of managers, he has messed up more. Whenever he's been successful, he's done it through pure luck. So his first most successful appointment was Martin Jol back in 2005, and Jol only got the job because Santini came over to England, couldn't speak English and couldn't get back over the channel quick enough because he just decided, you know, I think he lasted about 3 or 4 games. We managed to get the park the bus game against Chelsea and then he was off. So he went and Jol got the job out of the fact that there was no one else to do it, and then he managed to keep it. And then, of course, you know, at that point, his most successful manager, Tottenham's most successful and most loved manager for 15 years maybe, gets sacked at half-time of a European game. I mean, that's any way to treat anyone. So if you're Brendan Rodgers, you know, you think, okay, so you sacked your guy at half-time of a game where everyone in the crowd knew he was sacked before he did himself. Then his next most successful appointment was Redknapp. And again, Redknapp ultimately got sacked because he flirted with the England job and then ended up not getting it. And it was like Levy was punishing him for it, which I'm not too critical of him for it, but at the same time, it was a cutting your nose off to spite your face job with Redknapp, because if we kept Redknapp, we could have built and we could have carried on. He played some great football. We had a great team, and then of course his most successful appointment today, all three of them, not including the trophy, was Maurizio, and he built this great team 2014 to 2017, and then he didn't invest in 2017, and then he ends up sacking him because the man's tired and he's had enough. So it's not like, as a Spurs fan, you can sit and think, oh yeah, great, we've got the chairman who knows how to recruit. We've got someone who gets it wrong more than he gets it right, and when he gets it right, he gets it wrong. There
is a few other names, and I noticed because I've just had a sneaky peek at your notepad, and you've got Bielsa written down.
I've got Bielsa question mark.
Certainly a character. Certainly plays an attractive type of football. Short term. Well, I mean, his history suggests he doesn't stick around for any more than 2 or 3 years. But short term, that could be, I think, what you would need.
I think if you look at where Spurs are at the moment, the next appointment will be a short-term appointment, because the manager that we want clearly isn't available. If assuming that the Ajax guy hasn't signed a contract just to get himself some more money, and then we end up getting him in the summer.
Well, I think everyone around Europe was certainly eyeing up Nagelsmann from RB
Leipzig.
That's
Nagelmann's gone. Yeah. Rodgers says he doesn't want it, so let's take him on face value.
I've got one real outside name to throw at you.
Go on.
Steven Gerrard.
No, because Tottenham would just then be a stepping stone. His Premier League experience for him to then go to Liverpool. And the moment that it goes wrong at Liverpool is he would jump. I mean, for a year or two, why not Bielsa
we're talking about
wait for Poch to finish his PSG project?
Do you think Poch would come back, bearing in mind how he was treated towards the end, though?
I think he just needed a break. I'd like to think he'd come back. He's talked about unfinished business and wanting to win a trophy.
Yeah.
I think if he can, I mean, the dream for most Spurs fans would be he goes off to PSG and he wins a lot, and then he can come back to Spurs as a winner, as opposed to having that question mark over his head about.
I mean,
can he?
You would certainly think at PSG he would expect to get some sort of trophies under his belt, a couple of league titles, some cups and whatnot.
The problem is, in reality, at PSG, a bit like Bayern Munich,
there's not really
you're judged on the Champions League, aren't you?
There is that, and obviously our current manager got sacked last season for not delivering that final, which is quite ironic, really. And obviously, talking about Mr. Levy and you're bald, I know you've got a hell of a lot to say on that. Obviously, it's not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, we had the fouled ESL breakaway. What are your thoughts on Levy signing you into that?
I have a level of sympathy to a degree in him getting Tottenham in. The joke around the whole ESL announcement is, well, what are Tottenham doing in there? Now,
I did quite enjoy some of the memes that were flying around at the time.
Now, but, of course, all this stuff is got absolutely nothing to do with the quality of the football team. It's all about the level of money generated.
Yeah.
And of course, with the new stadium that he's so proud of, the stadium that was actually completed way over time and he's still got a massive bonus for, does throw us into the that level, that area. So I'd have some sympathy, and also to a degree that if the conversations are being had, you would want to be part of the conversation.
I think certainly, obviously, from our perspective at Chelsea, it was a case, I think maybe for any club that was possibly sent an invite, if you miss out, I mean, there was a lot of money. I mean, this is being bankrolled with a lot of money behind it.
Yes and no, but just to come back on the use of language, sent an invite. Now, now Chelsea or Levy, Abramovich, they were not sent invites. They got round the table with the other bosses of the big European clubs and created something. So they created their own invitation.
Yes.
Now, they didn't have to have that conversation. So I can kind of see to a degree why he would want to do it. But he's so arrogant, I can also see why he'd want to get away with it.
As well. If you're not actually putting yourself at that table, and should that have gone ahead and kicked off and all of a sudden became this huge product, there probably would have been fans, well, why isn't he there?
Without question.
I don't mean, in many ways, you probably can't win
which is why I'm not overly critical about that. However, he could have acted as a grass, if you like, and gone, all the big clubs are having this conversation. We need to stop this. This is wrong. This goes against the pyramid of our football and the way we do things in England. But of course he didn't, because he thinks of the money. Now, it's fine thinking of the money, but what Tottenham being part of a European Super League did not do was allow us to catch up on revenue with Chelsea or Milan or whomever it might be, or Bayern Munich and Barcelona and all them, because we were getting the same money as all the other English teams. So we weren't in a position where we could all of a sudden start competing with Man City, as an example, to sign players, because
you're all getting the same money.
We're all getting the same money.
Yeah.
And for the first 2 years, we were actually getting less money than Barcelona and Madrid. So we're actually putting ourselves at a disadvantage, bearing in mind when you look at the Premier League that we actually turn over more money than these two teams. So all we were doing, people talk about, Celtic and Rangers coming down to the Premier League. We were basically inviting Barcelona and Madrid to enjoy the wealth that the English clubs have got.
Yeah.
That's all we were doing. And then...
with no fear of relegation.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
So it eliminates, like you say, with the catch-up aspect, in terms of actually getting steps ahead of other teams. We wouldn't,
So you could get to the point. Let's assume that Tottenham will be languishing somewhere down the bottom of this mythical European Super League. So we'll start losing games against, in this league. And at the same time, we don't have to worry about our league form, because it makes no difference, like whether we finish in the top four or whether we finish.
So what have you got?
As long as we finish 17th, we're not getting relegated from the Premier League. Yeah. So there's absolutely every game ultimately becomes a pre-season friendly. So it's absolutely ridiculous. But then the big thing, I guess, from the Tottenham perspective, post the announcement, and also I guess post the scrapping of it.
Yeah,
well, it's not scrapped, is it?
It's not. No, Spanish teams still think they're going to be able to go ahead of it somehow.
Well, we know that all 6 of them are still involved in conversations. They're working out how they repackage it and when they re-announce it.
Yeah,
is that Levy or Tottenham did not apologise. All 5 of the other owners from the English clubs.
I mean, the fallout
we got this wrong
at Chelsea is the fact that now in board meetings, albeit not about key critical financial in terms of player recruitment and stuff like that, but there will now be at our board meetings 3 members from Chelsea fan groups, if you like, that are going to be sitting in on board meetings.
And I sat on a Tottenham Hotspur supporters trust meeting, which basically requests exactly that. So we want to have a fan representative on the board to be part of the decision making process. I think with this season, with fans not being at the ground, I think from a fan's perspective, so I'm a season ticket holder, you feel so far removed from the club than what you've ever felt, because you're just sitting and you're watching games on the telly, the ground is are empty, and that kind of brings me back to this whole, the language around this CSL stuff, legacy fans. So the fans that fill the stadiums. The way that this announcement obviously is based about getting international fans and getting as much international viewers and international TV revenue as you possibly can. But they talk about legacy fans, us, fans from the country, guys that go to the games, like we're completely unimportant.
Yeah.
Which completely means that they've lost. I mean, have they not been watching the games on telly this season when there's no crowd in the ground, there's no atmosphere? What that's done for the game, as in the way that results are going, how soulless it is.
It's like ripping out the heart and putting it on bypass.
Yeah,
putting the rest of the bodies on bypass, and the heart of it sitting over here going, well, what's going on, mate?
But if Tottenham play Real Madrid twice, 3-4 times a season, however many times they might be doing it, do you really think if it becomes a permanent fixture that you're going to get 4,000 Spurs fans, 5,000 Spurs fans travelling to Spain, every other week, and then going to Italy and then going to Germany?
I certainly find the whole ESL thing bizarre, given the current climate that we're in, and the fact that, like you say, fans financially wouldn't be able to do it because the financial cost of travelling under coronavirus restrictions, it would be ridiculous.
So these owners don't understand their own product. They don't understand that and why England is, and why the Premier League is such this product overseas. It's because of the fans, because you don't have the away culture in Spain and Germany and the other countries, but in England you do. You'll get 3,000, 4,000 fans travelling every week, and it's that atmosphere that is why the Premier League is so good. Because let's be honest, the football's no better than what you see elsewhere.
But it's the whole package that makes it. It's the fans giving it And you've only got to look at the impact of not having fans in grounds this season. For me, the incredible amount of away wins that have happened, because there isn't that 12-man pressure.
Exactly.
And say at a stadium the size of yours as well. Like if I'm a Man United player and I'm stepping on the pitch in front of say 80,000 screaming Spurs fans, that's going to has an impact.
Yeah, of course, and it does without question, and that's ultimately why Levy built that ground, and hopefully it will come to fruition in the future. But at the moment,
in terms of the Tottenham board, what if you was to say you wanted to make key changes to the setup of the way the club's run? Would you like to see, obviously, would Levy replaced or go?
Well, he owns the club, so it's very difficult to go, right, see you later, because someone's got to buy it. And I understand the better the devil you know concept. With me, he's meant to be this amazing businessman. Now let's just take the assumption that he's this amazing businessman. But where he definitely fails is when he gets involved in the football club. He's too involved in the recruitment and in the general day-to-day running of the football club. So the bare minimum for me would be that he has to step away from running the football club. I say running in inverted commas because I don't think he does it. But step away from the responsibility of the football club and run the business. So
maybe an appointment of a director of football.
A director of football, a CEO of the football club, whatever you want to call it. But someone who he basically gives a budget to and says, right, anything on the footballing side, this is your responsibility. And I'm not getting involved in whether you spend that money on wages to players, whether you spend it on transfer fees, whether you spend it on signing up the best young talent from all around the world. However you want to spend that money, you spend it. It's your budget. And equally, that person should have the responsibility about hiring and firing managers.
Yeah.
And not him.
And I would think in an ideal situation, that person, that director of football, would have a history with the club as well.
You'd like to think so, but I wouldn't limit it. I just think we need to get the right person.
Or certainly a
good relationship with whoever the manager comes.
Yeah, and certainly have an understanding of football.
Yeah, it needs to be a football person.
You don't want, you can have a level of sort of like football business acumen if you like, but I think if you're making football decisions, you need to have a football background.
It's probably an ex-manager, isn't it? It's someone who's used to balancing the books of a first team and wages.
At Chelsea, we brought in Petr Cech.
Yeah, someone like that. Yeah.
That bridged that gap between, that board level. Yeah. Certainly having fans on, board meetings. I think that's something that every club in England actually should be looking at doing anyway. Obviously, if you look at Germany, a lot of their clubs, I think in the Bundesliga, 51%, other than RB Leipzig. I think RB Leipzig are the only privately owned club.
Get around it, don't they? Yeah. Which is why they're not liked in Germany, because they're not get around the legislation. Yeah.
But I think certainly, we're well beyond in terms of ownership level, fans having a level of ownership of clubs. But I think Premier League revenues are well beyond that.
But transparency needs to be had, and a way that then we can understand decisions, and decisions can be passed back down to fans. Football, I think, in England, and Tottenham are probably right at the top of the pyramid or of the queue, is close to completely imploding, I think, because of this lack of respect for the legacy fans.
Yeah.
The irony about the ESL stuff, which is ridiculous, is that it made Sky look like the good guys. Now, I would argue, what Sky have done since they've come in, they've obviously improved the product, they've put a lot of money in, but you look at the kickoff times when they will make Newcastle play Brighton on a Monday night. Yeah. So all of a sudden, the announcement of this Super League allowed Sky to take the side of the fans, when for years Sky haven't given a damn about the fans.
Arguably, what we've seen with the ESL is effectively what those breakaway Premier League clubs did back in 1990 anyway.
The only reason that Sky weren't happy about it was because they weren't involved in the conversations.
And 100% when it came down to terms of the bidding for the broadcasting rights, Sky would have thrown their hat in there.
Of course they would have.
You'd be stupid as a broadcaster not to.
Of course they
would. So it is a bit hypocritical.
But even if you even look at the way the TV times have changed, forget this season because of the whole COVID stuff and people not going to games. But I live in London. I was a season ticket holder with Spurs, and games would kick off at 4:30 on a Sunday night. Now, And then
it's completely impractical.
Yeah, by the time I get back home, I'm going to bed straight to then get up Monday morning to go to work. It's like the whole concept. Football kicked off at 3 o'clock on the Saturday because workers finished work at 12 o'clock on the Saturday. They picked up their wages, literally picked up their wages in cash,
and went
straight down the pub, and then went to football. And that's why it kicks off at 3 o'clock. And that's what part of going to football is about. It's about having a few beers before and a few beers afterwards and seeing your mates.
Yeah, every day now seems to have a super something. Be it, a Friday night football, Saturday night football, Super Sunday.
I'm not too critical of it in this COVID world because, fans can't go to games. So let's watch every game that we can. That's fine. But next season, would Sky be doing the same? Friday nights, Monday nights, 4:30 on the Sunday, 8 o'clock on the Saturday night. Now, 3 o'clock on Saturday. Let's just.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine that. Like you say, like a 5:30 kickoff, and you're away at Liverpool.
Yeah. It's just
on a Sunday.
It's just so quite how that just shows how bots of communication was that Sky end up being on the side of the fan.
That's one thing throughout this whole pandemic that I've missed about not being able to go to football matches. Previous to just before the pandemic sort of kicked in, I was taking my daughter to watch the Chelsea ladies at Kingsmeadow. And I know that's only like 700 or 800 sort of fans, but in terms of the football atmosphere, that's one thing I've really missed. And obviously, your stadium, pretty new. You've only been in there a while, and all of a sudden this whole pandemic kicks off and you're not able to go to games, especially as the season ticket holder as well. So how's that for you?
Yeah, as I think I said, this season's been tough. It's been there's a real disconnect with the team, and I guess with the team not doing very well either, it's really made that increase that disconnect between the team and the fans. So I can't wait to get back to the new ground. It's an amazing ground, obviously.
Yeah,
but
while the ground was being built, I actually was up there quite a few times. I popped up on a transfer deadline day because I went around all the grounds in London and seeing I took some pictures, and that sort of like that home one terrace stand was just hovering in midair, and it just the size of it was the sheer size of that one
massive.
stand.
I'm in that stand. I'm kind of 2/3 up in it. So it's a great view. It's a great ground. There's probably not a bad seat in the ground. The ground ultimately is the reason for our problem.
Best stadium in the world at the moment.
It is, but then this goes back to my whole issue with Levy and the fact that he sees Tottenham as an entertainment venue and not a football club. Yeah. So, the ground was not built because Tottenham fans demanded a brand new ground. He would have taken Tottenham to Stratford. He would have taken us to
you did go in for the Olympic Stadium, didn't you?
He built that ground because it makes it a greater sellable asset for him. So when he ultimately sells Tottenham, and when Nick and Joe Lewis sell Tottenham,
a multi-event stadium,
it then becomes more attractive, and he earns more money from it.
Well, the American football pitch is actually underneath.
Yeah.
Because I remember I watched a video on YouTube, and it's quite incredible. And that part of the stand lifts up,
and it goes.
The grass pitch disappears, and it's a synthetic pitch underneath, isn't it?
It's impressive technology, but of course, no Tottenham fan asked for it. No Tottenham fan wanted it. And if you chart the decline of Tottenham from 2017, the last season at White Hart Lane where we went undefeated, the ground is the reason. The ground it's taken money away from the team. It's taken money away from what should be the core, which is the football club. And it was obviously over budget, over time. So we ended up with half a season at Wembley when the fans just had enough of Wembley, and we just wanted to be back in Tottenham.
To be fair, as nice as Wembley looks from the outside, and when you're in it, in terms of an actual atmosphere and for watching football, it isn't great.
Wembley is an example of how grounds get outdated very quickly, because Wembley was only redeveloped about 20 years ago, wasn't it? I think
something like that. Yeah.
And now, my season ticket in Wembley is just not comparable to my season ticket in the Tottenham ground. The view I had there at Wembley, I could barely see anything, and it's only when you then go to a ground where you've got a better seat that you realise.
Yeah.
But on the flip side to that, the Tottenham ground now has got amazing technology. Everyone's talking about how great it is and how it might be the best ground in the world. Brilliant. But in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, It won't be. Someone else's ground to be
Someone
proud.
else, yeah.
You know, everyone was waxing lyrical about the Emirates when they built that, and it's taken Arsenal all this time to pay it off. Barely won anything in the time that they paid it off, and now they've got this ground which is a mile, 2 miles up the road, which is said to be better. Yeah, and there's, and theirs is, ours is good for atmosphere. The only thing I will give Levy credit for is the ground has been built to keep the atmosphere in, and in the big games, the noise is good. The noise is great.
Yeah, I mean, last time I went to the original White Hart Lane, I was only a kid. Some around sort of 10 to 12 years old or whatever it was. But the atmosphere at that old ground was something a bit special.
Yeah.
And it's one of those. It was one of those old-fashioned sort of four-sided football grounds. Albeit later on, obviously, it had corners filled in and extra bits added and that. But I think being one of those grounds, and places like that, places like Upton Park, when the fans are on top of the pitch, that's different. That's almost real football for me.
Yeah, you had the old Paxton Road and you had the Shelf, and the noise that the fans would make. Yeah, it was, as you say, it was built in. It was a tight ground. When I first started going, we had standing, so that was amazing. With the atmosphere, and particularly on the European nights or on a night game, White Hart Lane, was buzzing. But of course, the irony is, everyone talks about White Hart Lane throughout the years like it's the same ground. Whereas the joke when we were leaving the ground was, in effect, it's like Trigger's Brew. You look at how it's not the same ground. The different stands have been built all the way through, and it keeps changing and it keeps evolving. And this new ground is on pretty much exactly the same site. So,
well, I remember watching, in the last few games at White Hart Lane, you could actually see the new ground creeping in.
Yeah,
that was actually an incredible thing to see.
Yeah. I think we've been lucky by keeping it in the same place, because ultimately it then means you've got the same fans coming. There's been issues with, of course, the ground's in the same place, but people have, because of different stands and stuff, so people have been getting seats in different places, and that's had an impact to a degree. I guess you get some people that want to sing and have an atmosphere, and other people that don't, and because of the way the pricing is, you end up kind of together as opposed to being separate. But no, I mean, overall, it's a lovely ground, and I guess it's, as far as the whole Super League stuff it's moved us into that level, isn't it? On top of making the Champions League final.
I think one final thing I'm going to ask you to finish off, if you could give me one memory, and this can go right back to when you first started going to White Hart Lane, up until maybe even your last game at the new stadium. If you could give me one standout memory from being at a match at either stadium, that something that really, to this day, when you look back on, sort of triggers those hairs on the back of your neck to stand up.
I'm going to struggle with one. I'll try and keep it down to 3 or 4. So
okay, that's good.
First North London derby would have been like 92, and we won 1-0.
You remember who scored?
Paul Allen. Paul Allen scored.
Paul
Allen scored, and we won 1-0. That would have been November 92. And just the buzz, just the sheer noise. And of course, then at the time I was standing in the Paxton. And I'd never, as a early teenager, I just never experienced anything like it. And it was probably that kind of, got me hooked.
Would you like to see safe standing, rail seating brought into the new stadium?
Yeah, I think
know a few clubs talking about it.
I can remember another time, again, early 90s, where Nicky Barmby was playing for Spurs, and again it was standing, and he scored this most amazing loop header from the edge of the penalty box.
Was that like a diving header from the edge?
Yeah,
I think I remember that.
And it kind of looped over the keeper, and I was standing in the goal behind, it was a Paxton. And we were standing, I was a kid, and I was at the back of the Paxton, and by the time the celebration finished, I was at the front. So I never forget that.
I had a very similar experience, actually. One of my first games at Stamford Bridge, I don't know if you remember the old Shed End terrace.
Yeah.
And there used to be these big, horrible looking yellow iron girders all the way across. And I was at the back, and we scored, and I ended up jumping up on top of one of them, getting carried down the front. Incredible.
I remember again, early 90s would have been, and this time I was actually sitting down, and Klinsmann had signed for Spurs, and we were playing United, and until that point, I'd never seen movement like Klinsmann. He never stood still.
Unbelievable.
He was absolutely amazing. You could just watch him, and how he used to lose his centre half. And of course, typically with Tottenham, none of these memories involve trophies or anything. and Klinsmann scored a goal against United. It would have been 94, because it was one of his first few games at Spurs, and I was sitting in the stand. I think at that time, I think it was a Paxton game, but by this time it had seats in it. And he came out and he slid and he celebrated.
Was this the aeroplane celebration?
No, he just slid down and was doing this, and I almost felt like he was looking at me. Now, ironically enough, the goal was disallowed, but it was just an amazing kind of
that moment.
Yeah, because particularly if you go back to the early 90s, before there was this influx of foreign players into the Premier League, Klinsmann was a superstar.
Yeah.
And there he was, like literally almost touching distance to me, and he just scored this goal, and the crowds are going crazy. So that was, and then of course the goals disallowed, and I think we ended up losing the game against United.
I think I am planning on doing, and hopefully you'll probably join me on this one as well. Greatest forwards in the Premier League era, and I think certainly Klinsmann's going to be in there. Certainly for me, anyway.
His movement was immense. He never stood still, and even though just a small little movement, and just watching him for a whole season was amazing. He was top. Off the ball, not what he did when he had the ball, because you can see that on telly.
Yeah.
But what he did off the ball was.
I think that's one thing you actually miss. Not being in when you're in a TV, you see what is being shown to you. Yeah. When you're sat in a stadium and you're watching a game, particularly if you're like a little bit high up as well, you can kind of take in the real sort of like tactical aspect of the way a team sets up and the way players' movement and the class players like people like that. They always seem to have time on the ball, but it's because of their movement. Yeah. They buy that time. So in terms of the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, have you got any early memories that you think will stick around for you for a while?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the City game in the Champions League, the quarter-final, was amazing. It was the first Champions League game in the ground, and of course everything that went on.
Was that the one with the Raheem Sterling goal that was disallowed via VAR, or was that in the other leg?
No, there was a penalty that was given for a very, very dodgy Danny Rose handball, which was behind the one tier stand where I was. And so all of us were just, Rose, great, ball's gone out for a corner, and we're waiting for the corner to come in, and all of a sudden the rest given the penalty. And then Kane got injured with Delph. I don't know if you remember. Kane went in for a challenge, and then Delph got up and gave him some mouth, and he was off the field, and that's where he did his ankle in.
Yeah.
And but I think that the key for that one was it was an amazing atmosphere, and of course talking about how the stadium keeps the noise in. And then, of course, Kane goes off, and then Son scores, and we win 1-0, despite the fact we've lost our best player, our talisman. But probably the key I find, which really interesting, was we were there, first game at the ground, and you've got the Champions League anthem. So for the quarter-final, we're literally listening or singing along to the Champions League anthem. Then you get to the semi, and we're playing Ajax in the semi-final, and how our emphasis as a fan group has completely shifted. The noise was so loud, I didn't hear the Champions League anthem for the semi-final.
There's something about that music.
Yeah.
There's something about a European night. When that music kicks in and the stadium's packed. I touched on that with Andy in our last episode, because obviously Old Trafford being 74,000, when that music comes on, the fans start. That's something, yeah.
But you couldn't hear it for the semi because we were just so, as a fan group, so excited, so behind the team. And of course, we ended up losing the game to Ajax 1-0. Probably didn't perform that well, but the noise in the ground again was amazing. So they're the two standouts so far. And hopefully next season there'll be some more memories to add to the bank.
Well, I mean, they're talking obviously the last two fixtures of the season that we're going to be able to get fans back in the ground, and hopefully, fingers crossed, full stadiums as of next year. So I think that's definitely something that we're all looking forward to. Well, that's been our Spurs episode, mate. I mean, we've gone for just over an hour talking about Spurs. I didn't think we'd be able to, fill that much time with Spurs. I'm a Chelsea fan. I've got to get a dig in, somewhere. So I'd like to thank Paul for coming on and joining me on this Tottenham-focused episode.
Loved it, mate. Anytime.
And we're going to have Paul back, hopefully, on some other episodes coming up soon. I think he's probably got a lot to say on a lot of other subjects I've got coming up.
Anytime you want.
And thank you for joining us on the Tilt Football Podcast.